The piercing ring of my phone sliced through the quiet of my small apartment, jolting me from a dead sleep. Rain tapped a restless rhythm against the glass of my bedroom window, a sound that merged with the distant wail of sirens, the constant soundtrack of life in this part of Chicago. I groped for the phone on my nightstand, my eyelids feeling like they were lined with lead. The screen's glare was a harsh intrusion in the gloom. Hello? My voice was a gravelly whisper, thick with a fatigue that had settled deep in my bones. 3 back-to-back night shifts at St. Jude's had left me utterly depleted, my body aching for the kind of deep, uninterrupted rest that was a distant memory for a single mother. Silence greeted me, followed by the faint, steady sound of someone breathing on the other end. I glanced at the clock. 2:37 a.m. Hello, I tried again, a thread of irritation weaving into my tone. My 5-year-old Leo was finally asleep at my mom's for the night, a rare chance for me to truly recharge. If this is some kind of joke, it isn't funny. Where is it? The voice that finally came was deep and measured, laced with an authority that sent an immediate, unwelcome chill down my spine. Those 3 words were not a question. They were a command. I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong number, I said, pushing myself up in bed, suddenly wide awake. Don't play games with me, the voice dropped, each syllable pronounced with cold precision. You were supposed to make the delivery an hour ago. Where is it? My heart began to hammer against my ribs as I tried to make sense of his words. Sir, I honestly have no idea what you're talking about. You've dialed the wrong person. My name is Clara Rossi. I'm a nurse at St. Jude's, and I was asleep until you called. The silence that followed stretched on, feeling heavy and absolute. I could still hear his breathing, calm and controlled, a stark contrast to my own shallow, panicked gasps. Describe yourself. The sudden demand was disorienting. What? No, I'm hanging up. Describe yourself, or I will find you and see for myself. The threat wasn't loud or overtly aggressive. It was the chilling certainty in his tone that made my blood feel like ice in my veins. This is insane. I raked a hand through my messy hair, my exhausted mind struggling to catch up. I'm calling the police. A low, humorless chuckle echoed through the phone. By all means. Tell them Dante Moretti would like a word. The name was meaningless to me, but the way he said it, as if it were a name that opened doors and silenced opposition, made me pause. Look, I don't know who you are or what this is about, but… Dark hair or light? He interrupted, his question sharp and direct. What? Your hair, Clara Rossi. Is it dark or light? Every rational thought screamed at me to end the call, to block the number, to dismiss this bizarre, menacing conversation. But bewildered and still half asleep, I found myself answering. Dark brown. Please just stop. Eye color. This is harassment. Eye color. It was an order now, not a question. Green. The word slipped out before I could stop it. Please, just leave me alone. I heard muffled sounds as if he had covered the receiver to speak to someone else. When his voice returned, it had shifted, becoming softer, almost contemplative. You truly have no idea who I am, do you? A wave of relief washed over me. No, I don't. This is a mistake. A wrong number. I'm sorry you can't find who you're looking for, but I can't help you. Another pause. Interesting, he murmured, the word hanging in the air between us, heavy with implications I couldn't begin to understand. I apologize for disturbing your rest, Clara Rossi, nurse at St. Jude's. Sleep well. The line went dead. I sat frozen in my bed, phone clutched in my hand, staring at the dark screen. Outside, the rain grew heavier, drumming against the window in a frantic tempo that mirrored the beating of my heart. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just a strange misunderstanding I'd forget by morning. but I couldn't shake the terrifying conviction that by answering that call, I had opened a door to something I should have left closed. I moved through my shift the next day in a fog, the memory of the strange call clinging to the edges of my thoughts. St. Jude's was chaotic, the ER swamped with the fallout from a multi-car pileup on the Eisenhower Expressway. By late afternoon, I had almost managed to convince myself the entire episode had been a stress-induced dream. "You look like something the cat dragged in," Brenda commented from across the nurse's station. A veteran nurse with salt and pepper hair pulled into a tight bun, she assessed me over the top of her reading glasses with a sharp, no-nonsense gaze. "Thanks for the confidence boost," I muttered, scribbling notes on a patient's chart. "3 nights in a row, then a day shift. It's brutal." Brenda snorted. "When I was your age, I worked 10 doubles in a row during that big blizzard in '99. You kids have no stamina." I didn't argue. Brenda's work ethic was as legendary as her lack of sympathy for what she termed millennial whining. "There's a delivery for you at the front desk," she added, sliding another chart toward me. "Bed 4 needs a new dressing." "A delivery? For me?" I hadn't ordered anything. Brenda shrugged. "Someone's got a secret admirer. Must be nice." Flowers? It had been over a year since I'd even been on a date. Not since Kevin, a surgical resident who turned out to be dating half the hospital staff. My birthday was months away, and my mother's gifts tended toward the practical, like new socks for Leo or a sturdy casserole dish. Propelled by curiosity, I headed to reception on my break. The bouquet was breathtakingly large, a dramatic spray of pristine white lilies and deep purple irises that must have cost a small fortune. The receptionist, Dana, gave me a knowing look. "Someone's trying to impress you," she said, wiggling her eyebrows. "It has to be a mistake," I said, searching for a card. "No mistake. The guy who dropped them off asked for Clara Rossi by name, even had me check your ID before he'd hand them over." She pointed to a small, cream-colored envelope nestled among the flowers. My fingers felt unsteady as I opened it, a sense of dread settling over me before I even read the elegant, handwritten script inside. Sometimes the wrong connections lead to the right places. I look forward to exploring ours. There was no other message, just the cryptic words and a single initial. D. It had to be him. The man from the phone. "Who delivered these?" I asked Dina, trying to keep my voice even. "Some courier service I've never heard of. Guy was in a slick suit. Looked expensive." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "And cute, in a scary way. Built like a linebacker." "Did he say anything else?" "Nope. Just waited for me to confirm you were on shift, then left." She studied my face. "You okay, Clara? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine, just surprised." I forced a smile. "Could you keep these here for me until my shift ends? They're too big for the break room." As I walked back to the ER, my mind was racing. He knew where I worked. I had mentioned St. Jude's, but how had he learned my full name and my shift schedule? The thought sent a fresh wave of fear through the hospital's sterile, overheated corridors. For the remainder of my shift, I was on edge, constantly glancing over my shoulder, scrutinizing the faces of strangers, and jumping every time someone called my name. By the time I clocked out at 8, my nerves were completely shot. I considered leaving the flowers behind, but some instinct told me that abandoning them would be seen as a slight. For reasons I couldn't explain, that possibility scared me more than taking them. The hospital parking garage was as dim and foreboding as ever. I held my keys in one hand, pepper spray at the ready, while juggling the massive, unwieldy bouquet in the other. I hurried toward my beat-up sedan, parked in a far corner of the second level. I was so intent on reaching my car that I almost didn't see it. The black sedan parked 2 spots away, its engine humming quietly, its windows tinted so dark they were opaque. I slowed my pace, alarm bells screaming in my head. That spot had been empty this morning. As I got closer to my car, the passenger door of the sedan swung open. I froze, clutching the flowers to my chest like a shield, my thumb on the button of the pepper spray. A man emerged, tall and imposing in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. He moved with a liquid grace as he straightened and turned to face me. He had dark, impeccably styled hair, a strong, clean-shaven jawline, and eyes, dark, penetrating eyes that seemed to see right through me. "Clara Rossi," he said, and the voice was instantly, terrifyingly familiar. It wasn't a question. I took a reflexive step back. "How did you find me?" A faint smile touched the corners of his mouth but didn't warm his eyes. "Finding people is a simple matter, with the right resources." "What do you want?" "To offer a proper apology for my call, and to satisfy my curiosity." He leaned against the gleaming car, hands tucked in his pockets, the very picture of casual confidence. But there was nothing casual about the intensity of his gaze, or about the other man, powerfully built with the clear outline of a shoulder holster under his jacket, standing sentinel by the driver's door. I gripped the pepper spray canister tighter. Curiosity about what? About the kind of woman who answers an unknown number at 2:37 in the morning and engages a complete stranger in conversation. He tilted his head. Most would have hung up. "I was half asleep," I said defensively. "And I'm a nurse. My phone rings at all hours." "Ah, yes. The caregiver." He studied me for a moment. "The flowers. I hope they are to your liking?" I glanced down at the bouquet, its rich, cloying scent filling the space between us. "They're extravagant and unnecessary." "I disagree. Beauty should be acknowledged." The compliment, delivered so matter-of-factly, threw me off balance. I shifted my weight, feeling deeply uncomfortable. "Look, Mr. Moretti," he corrected smoothly. "Dante Moretti." "Mr. Moretti," I continued, my voice firm. "I don't know what you want, but this. Finding out where I work, waiting for me in a parking garage. This is stalking. It's terrifying." Something in his expression shifted, darkened. "I assure you, if my intention was to terrify you, there are far more effective methods at my disposal." A cold dread washed over me. "That sounds like a threat." "Merely an observation." He straightened up, taking a step in my direction. I instinctively recoiled, and he paused, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "I have made you uncomfortable. That was not my intent." "What was your intention?" He considered me for a long moment before he answered. "To meet the woman with the voice that has been echoing in my head all day, to see if her eyes were truly as green as I imagined." Despite my fear, I felt a blush creep up my neck. "Well, you've seen me, so you can leave me alone now." "What if I don't want to?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Before I could think of a response, the man by the driver's door spoke in a low, urgent tone. "Boss, we've got company." "Security patrol." Dante's expression didn't change, but I saw a subtle tensing in his posture. "It seems our conversation must be continued at another time." He reached into his jacket, produced a business card, and held it out. "My private number. Should you or your son ever require assistance." My blood ran cold. Your son. He knew about Leo. I made no move to take the card. "I won't be calling you." That ghost of a smile returned. "We shall see." He placed the card on the hood of my car, then opened the passenger door of the sedan. Before getting in, he paused and looked at me one last time. "By the way, Clara Rossi, the flowers were just the beginning. From now on, you and your son are mine." The door closed with a soft, solid thud. The sedan pulled away, its engine a low growl as it disappeared down the ramp just as a security car rounded the corner. I stood frozen, his words echoing in my ears, the small card on my car seeming to pulse with an invisible energy. You and your son are mine. Who was this man who could say such a thing to a stranger? And why, despite the terror coursing through me, did a treacherous part of me feel a flicker of curiosity about what he meant? With a shaking hand, I picked up the card, intending to tear it to pieces. Instead, I found myself slipping it into my pocket before unlocking my car and carefully placing the flowers on the passenger seat. As I drove toward my mother's house to pick up my son, I couldn't escape the feeling that my life had just been violently derailed and that the eventual crash was going to be catastrophic. The card felt like a hot coal in my pocket on the drive to my mother's. I steered with one hand, the other clutching my phone, ready to dial 911 at the first glimpse of a black sedan in my rearview mirror. But no one seemed to follow me. My apartment building was an old converted warehouse in Pilsen, with exposed brick, drafty windows, and plumbing that groaned like a dying beast. But the rent was manageable on a nurse's salary, and the huge windows let in plenty of light. At night, however, those same windows made me feel vulnerable, as if I were on display for anyone watching from the street below. After picking up a sleepy Leo and getting him settled into his bed, I checked the locks on my door 3 times before placing the flowers on my kitchen counter. They looked absurdly out of place in my modest apartment, too perfect and opulent, much like Dante Moretti himself had seemed against the grimy backdrop of the hospital garage. From now on, you and your son are mine. The words circled in my head as I changed into sweatpants and an old t-shirt. What kind of man said that? A dangerous one. A powerful one. A man who was used to taking whatever he wanted. Dante Moretti. The name was still a blank slate, but his demeanor, the silent bodyguard, the expensive car, it all pointed to wealth and influence of a kind I had never encountered. Overcoming my better judgment, I opened my laptop and typed his name into a search engine. For a man of such apparent importance, his online footprint was surprisingly small. There were a few mentions in financial publications regarding real estate investments, a single photo from a charity gala 3 years ago, and a brief note in an article about rising figures in Chicago's economic landscape. Nothing that explained the chilling confidence with which he had told me to mention his name to the police. I clicked on the gala photo. There he was, immaculate in a tuxedo, his arm around a stunning blonde whose smile looked brittle. Dante's own expression was unreadable, his gaze fixed on something beyond the camera. The caption identified the woman as Isabella Giordano, daughter of the retired industrialist Luca Giordano. Something about the name Giordano sparked a vague memory. I searched for Luca Giordano and found a trove of information, including a decade-old article about his retirement following federal investigations into money laundering and suspected ties to organized crime. The charges had been dropped for lack of evidence. My blood turned to ice. It all clicked into place with horrifying clarity, the authority in Dante's voice, the bodyguard, the way he'd said his name as if it were a shield. The Mafia. He had to be connected to the Mafia. I slammed my laptop shut, suddenly terrified that even searching his name could somehow alert him to my prying. It was an irrational fear, but nothing about this felt rational. Normal single mothers didn't get late-night calls from mob bosses. Normal people didn't have dangerous, handsome men waiting for them in parking garages, claiming ownership over them and their children after one brief meeting. But my life had been far from normal since my parents died in a house fire when I was 19, leaving me utterly alone with a mountain of medical debt their insurance barely touched. I'd fought my way through nursing school, working double shifts, surviving on instant noodles and sheer grit, all driven by a need to help people the way the nurses had tried to help my parents. I had built a life for myself and for Leo from the ashes of that tragedy. It was a small, quiet life, but it was ours. The thought that this man could shatter it filled me with a potent mix of fear and fury. I pulled out the business card. It was simple and elegant. Thick, cream-colored stock with his name and a number embossed in black ink. No company, no title. I should throw it away. I should go to the police, tell them everything. I should ask for a transfer, move, change my number. Instead, I placed the card on my nightstand and tried to sleep. The scent of lilies and irises drifting from the kitchen, invading my dreams with images of dark eyes and possessive whispers. 3 days passed with no further word from Dante Moretti. No more flowers, no calls, no luxury cars in the parking garage. I started to relax, to tell myself that his strange obsession had been a fleeting one. Maybe he'd found whoever he was originally trying to call. Maybe he'd simply moved on. I buried myself in work, picking up an extra shift to keep my mind and body occupied. On the fourth day, my exhaustion finally won. I nearly gave a patient the wrong dosage before Brenda caught the error. "Go home, Rossi," she said, her tone uncharacteristically gentle. "You're a zombie. I'll cover for you." Too tired to protest, I thanked her and trudged to the locker room. When I opened my locker, a small white envelope fluttered to the floor. My name was written on the front in that same elegant script from the flower card. My hands shook as I tore it open. Dinner tonight. 8 p.m. A car will be waiting. It wasn't a request. It was a command. I crumpled the note in my fist, anger surging through my weariness. Who the hell did he think he was? But beneath the anger was something else, a forbidden flutter of excitement, a curiosity I couldn't stamp out. How had he gotten into my locker? I tossed the crumpled note in the trash. I was not having dinner with a man who thought he could summon me like a servant. I wasn't going anywhere near Dante Moretti again. By the time I got home, a thunderstorm was rolling in off the lake, a perfect match for my turbulent mood. I showered, letting the hot water sluice away the hospital smell and the tension in my shoulders. As steam clouded the bathroom, I closed my eyes, trying to clear my head. Instead, all I could see was the intensity in Dante's gaze. All I could hear was the quiet confidence in his voice when he'd said, "From now on, you and your son are mine." It hadn't been a threat or a promise, but a simple statement of fact. I shut off the water with an angry twist, irritated at my own traitorous thoughts. I was not some damsel in distress, captivated by a dark and dangerous man. I was a practical woman who had survived too much to risk my son's future for a thrill. After checking on a sleeping Leo, I glanced at the clock. 7:43 p.m. In 17 minutes, a car would be waiting outside, and Dante Moretti would expect me to be in it. "Not happening," I muttered, pulling leftover pizza from the fridge and settling on the couch to watch a mindless reality show. At precisely 8 am, my phone rang. Unknown number. I sent it to voicemail. It rang again. I ignored it. The third time I answered, my patience gone. "Stop calling me. The car is waiting, Clara." His voice was calm, completely unruffled by my anger. "And I'm not coming." "Yes, you are." There it was again, that absolute certainty. "I don't respond to orders, Mr. Moretti." "Dante," he corrected. And it was an expectation, not an order. "Well, your expectations are about to be crushed. I'm in my pajamas, eating cold pizza, and I have zero intention of going anywhere." There was a pause, and I could have sworn I heard a hint of amusement in his voice. "What kind of pizza?" The question was so unexpected I answered without thinking. "Pepperoni, from Giordano's on Taylor Street." "Their crust is overrated, the sauce is too sweet." I blinked. "You've eaten at Giordano's?" A soft chuckle. "I make it a point to know my city, Clara. Every restaurant, every street corner." "Is that how you found me? By knowing the city?" "No. Finding you required more specialized resources." A chill slithered down my spine. That's not comforting. It wasn't meant to be. He paused. I had hoped to discuss this over dinner, but since you have declined my invitation, it was a summons. I suppose I must be more direct, he continued, ignoring my interruption. The night you answered my call, I was expecting to hear from someone else. A man who had stolen something of great value from me. I set my pizza down, my body suddenly tense. I told you, I don't know anything about. I believe you, he cut in. What I find curious is that your phone number is only one digit different from his. A coincidence of that nature makes a man like me suspicious. It's just a coincidence, I insisted. It happens. Perhaps. But when the man who betrayed me is found dead in the Chicago River 2 days after I spoke with you, and his phone is missing. He let the implication hang in the air. My blood felt like it was turning to ice. Are you saying, did you kill him? I am saying that certain parties might believe you are connected to a man who stole from very dangerous people. People who might not be as discerning as I am. I stood up and walked to the window, peering through the blinds at the rain-swept street. Are you threatening me? On the contrary, I am offering you my protection. I let out a harsh laugh. Protection? From who? You and your friends? From whoever might come looking for what Sergei Ivanov stole before his accident. From whoever might believe that his last known contact traced to your number means you either have what he stole or know where it is. Sergei Ivanov. The name meant nothing to me, but apparently, my phone number's similarity to his had just entangled me and my son in a deadly game. What did he steal? I asked, my voice a whisper. That is not a conversation for an unsecured line. His tone was clipped. All business now. The car will wait for 15 more minutes. I strongly suggest you reconsider your position. The line went dead. I stood frozen by the window, the weight of his words crashing down on me. If he was telling the truth, if this Sergei person was dead and I was mistakenly linked to him, then Leo and I could be in real danger. But Dante was one of those dangerous people, wasn't he? How could I trust him to protect me from a threat he was a part of? I peered through the blinds again and saw it. A black sedan idling at the curb, its wipers sweeping rhythmically. It wasn't the same car from the garage. This one was larger, an SUV, its windows blacked out. It was waiting for me. My phone buzzed, a text message. 12 minutes. My heart hammered against my ribs. I could stay here, call the police, and hope this was all an elaborate lie, or I could go with him, step into the world of a man who radiated danger. Neither option felt safe, but if I went, at least I might get answers. With a curse, I ran to my closet and pulled on the first decent thing I could find. Dark jeans, an emerald green sweater my mother said brought out my eyes, and ankle boots. I threw my damp hair into a quick ponytail, swiped on some mascara, and grabbed my keys and phone. Another text arrived as I was locking the door. 5 minutes. I took the stairs, my mind racing. This was madness. I should call the police and report everything. But what did I have? A business card, some flowers, a dinner invitation. Nothing that couldn't be explained away as the clumsy advances of a rich, arrogant man. And if Dante Moretti was who I suspected he was, would the police be able to protect us? Or would involving them make things worse? I pushed through the lobby doors into the storm. The black SUV sat where I'd seen it. As I approached, the rear door opened from the inside. I hesitated, rain soaking my hair and clothes. Ms. Rossi. The driver had gotten out, holding an umbrella over my head. It was the same man from the parking garage. Mr. Moretti is waiting. I looked past him into the dark interior of the vehicle. Once I got in, there was no going back. I would be entering his world, playing by his rules. If I get in this car, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I want your word that I will be brought home safely tonight. The driver's face remained impassive. Mr. Moretti gives you his personal guarantee of your safety. It wasn't the reassurance I wanted, but it was all I was going to get. Taking a deep breath, I ducked into the car. The door shut behind me with a soft, expensive sound. The interior was dark, lit only by the passing city lights. And there he was, Dante Moretti, sitting across from me, his face half hidden in shadow, watching me with those intense eyes that missed nothing. "You came," he said, as if there had never been any doubt. "You didn't give me much of a choice." I clasped my hands tightly in my lap to hide their trembling. His lips curved into that ghost of a smile. "There is always a choice, Clara. You have just made your first one." The car pulled smoothly away from the curb, carrying me into the rainy Chicago night, and deeper into Dante Moretti's world. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just stepped into a beautiful, gilded cage, and the man across from me held the only key. The SUV glided through the rain-slicked streets of Chicago, the silence inside punctuated only by the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers. Dante watched me with an unnerving focus, as if he were memorizing every detail of my face. I resisted the urge to fidget under his scrutiny. "You look different with your hair up," he said finally. I self-consciously touched the messy ponytail. I had 5 minutes to get ready. It was not a criticism. His gaze drifted to my neck for a moment before returning to my eyes. "Green suits you." I suspected it would. The compliment made my chest flutter, a reaction that irritated me. I changed the subject. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere private, somewhere safe." "Those two things aren't always the same," I observed. A flicker of a smile touched his lips. "Perceptive. In this instance, however, they are." The vehicle turned onto Lakeshore Drive, heading north toward the affluent suburbs. Rain lashed against the roof, enclosing us in a cocoon of sound that made the entire situation feel even more surreal. "Tell me about Sergei Ivanov," I said, determined to get answers. "You said he stole something." Dante's expression hardened. "Not from me directly, from an associate. But the distinction is now irrelevant. Because he's dead." "Yes." The bluntness of his reply was chilling. "Did you kill him?" "Would it matter if I had?" "Of course it would matter," I snapped, my anger briefly eclipsing my fear. "I'm sitting in a car with you. I have a right to know if you're a murderer." He studied me for a long moment, his face a mask in the shifting shadows. "I did not kill Sergei Ivanov, but I cannot say I mourn his passing." "What did he steal that was so valuable?" "Information, the kind that can ruin lives, blackmail of a sort." He reached into a concealed compartment and produced a crystal decanter and 2 glasses. "Drink?" I shook my head. I need to keep a clear head. That faint smile appeared again. "Smart girl." "I'm not a girl, I'm 30 years old, a woman with a child." "A woman?" he amended, pouring himself a measure of amber liquid. "A beautiful, intelligent woman who answers strange calls in the middle of the night and walks into danger with her eyes wide open." "I didn't walk into danger. I was dragged into it when you dialed the wrong number." He took a slow sip of his drink. "Fate has curious ways of bringing people together." "This isn't fate. It's a mistake. A coincidence." "I don't believe in coincidences, Clara." The way he said my name sent a shiver down my spine. "Everything happens for a reason." I looked out the window. The city lights had given way to the dark wooded estates of the North Shore. A deep unease settled in my stomach. "You said we were going somewhere safe." "We are." He gestured toward the windshield. Massive wrought iron gates were swinging open, admitting our vehicle to a long, winding driveway flanked by towering oaks. At the end of it stood a mansion of stone and dark timber, its windows glowing with warm light against the stormy night. "This is your house?" I asked, unable to hide my awe. One of them. The SUV stopped under a stone portico. Before the driver could open my door, Dante was there, offering me his hand. I hesitated, then took it, startled by the warmth of his skin and the strength in his fingers as they closed around mine. The main entrance was flanked by two men in dark suits, who gave Dante a respectful nod as he led me inside. The foyer was vast, with a sweeping staircase and marble floors that echoed our footsteps. Museum-quality art hung on the walls, and a massive crystal chandelier scattered rainbows across the space. "This way," Dante said, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back, a touch that felt like a brand through my sweater. We passed through several opulent rooms before arriving in a large study. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows on walls lined with leather-bound books. "Please, sit," Dante said, gesturing to one of two wingback chairs facing the hearth. "Are you hungry? I imagine your pizza was interrupted." My stomach chose that moment to growl loudly. I hadn't eaten more than a few bites. "A little," I admitted. He pressed a button on the wall, and a moment later, a woman in a simple black uniform appeared. "Bring us dinner in here, Margot, and tea for Ms. Rossi." She nodded and vanished as silently as she had arrived. I sank into the soft leather chair, the heat from the fire chasing away the chill from the rain. I was suddenly aware of how damp my clothes were. "You must have questions," Dante said, taking the opposite chair. "Dozens," I replied. "Starting with why you brought me here instead of a restaurant." "Restaurants have ears, waiters, other patrons, people who can be bribed." He steepled his fingers. "What we must discuss requires absolute privacy." "And what is that exactly?" His dark eyes seemed to absorb the firelight. "Your safety, and its price." A chill that had nothing to do with the storm outside ran through me. "Price?" "Everything has a price, Clara. Protection, most of all." Margot returned with a tray of covered dishes, which she set on a table between us. She poured tea into a delicate porcelain cup for me and whiskey for Dante before leaving us alone again. I lifted the silver lid on my plate to find a perfectly cooked filet mignon with roasted vegetables. The aroma was intoxicating. "Eat," Dante said, uncovering an identical meal. "We will talk after." We ate in a tense silence, the only sounds being the crackling fire and the soft clink of silverware. When we had finished, Margot reappeared to clear the plates. Only when she was gone did Dante speak again. "Sergei Ivanov worked for an associate of mine for 5 years. He had access to sensitive information, client lists, financial records, evidence of certain transactions that law enforcement would find very interesting." He swirled the whiskey in his glass. 3 weeks ago, he vanished, along with a hard drive containing all of it. "And this associate is someone in the Mafia," I said bluntly. "Like you." Dante's expression remained neutral. "You've done some research." "Enough to know the name Giordano is linked to organized crime, and that you were photographed with Isabella Giordano, Luca's daughter." "My former fiancé?" He took a sip of his whiskey. "Our engagement ended 2 years ago." The information surprised me. I hadn't pictured him as someone capable of normal relationships. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was for the best." He set his glass down. "But we are not here to discuss my romantic history." "No. We're here because a dead man had a phone number almost identical to mine, and now you think my son and I are in danger." "I know you are in danger." The certainty in his voice was terrifying. 2 days ago, someone broke into Ivanov's apartment. My people had already searched it, but this second party found something we missed. A slip of paper with your phone number on it. My breath hitched. "That makes no sense. I never met him. Why would he have my number?" "That is what I intend to discover," Dante said, leaning forward. "But until I do, you and your son need protection." "My protection." "And what does that entail?" "You will stay here with Leo, where I can ensure your safety. You will continue to work, but my men will drive you. You will not go anywhere alone. Not until we find what Ivanov stole and figure out why he had your number. I stared at him. You expect me to move in with you? A complete stranger who is admittedly part of the mob? I expect you to choose survival, he said calmly. The people looking for that hard drive will not hesitate to hurt you or your son to get it, whether you have it or not. And you would? I challenged. Hesitate to hurt us? Something flickered in his eyes. Yes, he said simply. I would. Why? You don't know me. I know enough. He stood and went to a desk in the corner, retrieving a folder. He handed it to me. See for yourself. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Inside was a complete dossier on me. My birth certificate, college transcripts, employment history, even photos. The most recent one was from last week, showing me leaving my apartment with Leo, his hand in mine, completely unaware we were being watched. A feeling of violation washed over me. How dare you? I whispered, shoving the folder away. How dare you invade my life like this? I needed to know who I was dealing with, he said, returning the folder to the desk. And I found someone remarkable. A woman who lost her parents at 19 and still managed to put herself through nursing school, who chose a profession dedicated to others, who is raising a son on her own. Each word was a blow. Stop it. Someone who visits her parents' graves every month, who volunteers at the children's wing on her days off, who hasn't been in a serious relationship since a surgical resident named Kevin broke her trust over a year ago. Tears of anger and humiliation burned my eyes. I said, "Stop it." To my surprise, he did. He returned to his chair, giving me a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. I am not trying to hurt you, Clara. I am trying to show you that I have been thorough. I know exactly who I am offering to protect. I angrily wiped away a tear. And what's the price for this protection? You said everything has a cost. Yes. He studied me over the rim of his glass. The price is your trust. Your absolute trust in me. I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. After this, after you've admitted to stalking me, investigating my entire life, how could I possibly trust you? Because despite all of that, I am still your best chance at survival, he said. And because I am the only one who knows why Sergei Ivanov had your number. My heart skipped a beat. You said you didn't know. I said I intended to find out. There is a difference. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small photograph, placing it on the table. Do you recognize this man? I picked it up. It was a photo of a middle-aged man with sharp features and thinning hair. He looked vaguely familiar. I'm not sure. Maybe a patient's family member. His name is Robert Keller. He was your father's business partner. The photo slipped from my numb fingers. What? No. My father was an accountant for a firm downtown. He didn't have a partner. Dante's expression was unpitying. Your father, Frank Rossi, was an accountant. He also had a side business laundering money for certain organizations. Robert Keller was his contact. The room seemed to spin. That's not possible. My father was a good man. People are rarely so simple, he said, a hint of sympathy in his voice. Your father got in over his head. He was planning to go to the authorities. The fire, I whispered, the horrifying implication dawning on me. Are you saying it wasn't an accident? Dante's silence was all the answer I needed, the world I had known for the last 11 years shattered. I had mourned my parents, victims of faulty wiring in an old house. Bad luck. No, I said, scrambling to my feet. No, I don't believe you. This is some sick game. You're making this up to control me. I have no reason to lie to you, Clara, he said, remaining seated, and every reason to tell you the truth. Sergei Ivanov worked for Robert Keller. The hard drive he stole contains evidence of decades of financial crimes, including the payment to the man who set the fire that killed your parents. My legs gave out, and I sank back into the chair. Why, why would Ivanov have my number? Because you are Frank Rossi's daughter. Because someone, likely Keller himself, might believe your father told you something before he died. Something that could lead them to that hard drive. But he didn't, I said, my voice breaking. The last time I saw him, he was helping me study for a chemistry exam. There were no secrets. Perhaps not consciously, but you might know something without realizing it. Dante leaned forward again. Think, Clara. Did your father ever mention names? Places? Did he give you anything for safekeeping? I shook my head, my mind a maelstrom of shock and grief. No, he was just Dad. He taught me how to ride a bike. He took me to Cubs games. My voice faltered as a long dormant memory surfaced. Dante saw the shift in my expression immediately. What is it? It's nothing. A few weeks before the fire, he gave me a locket for my 19th birthday. He said it belonged to my grandmother, but I'd never seen my mother wear it. I touched my throat. I lost it after the fire. In all the chaos, a missing necklace didn't seem important. What did it look like? Silver, oval-shaped, with a filigree design on the front. Inside was a tiny picture of my parents on their wedding day. I frowned, trying to remember more. The clasp was broken. Dad said he was going to get it fixed, but then Dante stood abruptly. We need to find that locket. I told you it's lost. Everything was a mess. I moved 3 times in the year after they died. Or it could be exactly where someone left it for safekeeping. He crossed to a phone on the desk, pressed a button, and spoke rapidly in Italian. I only caught one word. Locket. When he hung up, he turned back to me, a new urgency in his demeanor. My men will start searching. In the meantime, you and Leo must stay here. The sheer enormity of it all was crushing. If my father had been involved in something so terrible, if his death was murder, then Dante was right. Leo and I were in danger, but trusting this man, moving into his house. I need time to think, I said, my voice shaky. Time is a luxury we do not have. Dante moved closer, his scent, sandalwood and something else. Something clean and masculine, filling my senses. Whoever is looking for that drive now knows about you. It is only a matter of time before they find you. How do I know you're not one of them? That this isn't some elaborate trap? His jaw tightened. You don't. That is the price I spoke of. Trust. You have to decide, right now, if you are going to trust me. That's not fair, I whispered. You've had weeks to learn everything about me. I've known you for less than a week. Life isn't fair, Clara. He reached out, his thumb gently brushing a tear from my cheek. The simple touch sent a jolt of unwelcome electricity through me. If it were, your parents would still be alive and we would never have met. I pulled away, needing space. If I stay, I have conditions. I keep my job. I want my own space, my own privacy for me and my son. All reasonable requests, he nodded, though I must insist on approving your movements for security purposes. And when this is over, when you find what you're looking for, I get my life back. You disappear. A shadow passed through his eyes, a possessiveness that made my breath catch. Is that truly what you want? Before I could answer, the study door burst open. The driver, Nico, rushed in, his face tight with urgency. Boss, he said, his eyes flicking from me to Dante. We have a situation. Your apartment in the city. It's been compromised. Dante's entire demeanor shifted, becoming predatory and still. Explain. Security system was disabled 7 minutes ago. Team 2 responded. Found forced entry. The place was torn apart. Casualties? None of ours. There's a body. Male, mid-30s, single gunshot wound. Not one of our usual rivals. ID says Robert Collins, but we're running it. The name was unfamiliar, but Dante's expression grew darker. Facial recognition is running. Preliminary results suggest a connection to the Volkov group. Dante swore under his breath in Italian. Lock down the estate, double the perimeter guards. No one in or out without my direct authorization. He turned to me, his face grim. It seems your decision has just been made for you. They are moving much faster than I anticipated. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through my shock. This wasn't a game. People were dead. My parents, Sergei Ivanov, this unknown man. And somehow, I was the link. What do we do now? I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. Dante's dark eyes met mine. We find that locket before they do, and I keep you and your son alive, no matter the cost. In that moment, standing in the fire-lit study of a mob boss's mansion, I made my choice. Not because I trusted Dante Moretti, but because I had no other option. I was irrevocably tangled in his dangerous world, and the only way out was through. Dante moved with a swift, controlled energy, issuing a stream of orders in Italian into his phone as he led me from the study. Nico followed close behind, his hand never straying far from the weapon holstered under his jacket. "Where are we going?" I asked, my shorter legs struggling to keep up with Dante's long strides. "Somewhere more secure." He guided me down a long corridor to what looked like a dead end. He pressed his palm against a section of wood paneling, which slid open to reveal a sleek, modern elevator. Very few people know this part of the house exists. The elevator descended, opening into a space that was a stark contrast to the old-world luxury above. This was a bunker of concrete, glass, and steel, designed for both comfort and ultimate security. "My private quarters," Dante explained, seeing my surprise. "The house above is for appearances. This is where I truly live." It was a stunning space, open and minimalist. One entire wall was glass, looking out onto a subterranean courtyard where a waterfall cascaded down a stone wall, illuminated by soft lights. "It's beautiful," I admitted, momentarily distracted from the imminent danger. Security and beauty are not mutually exclusive. Dante's phone rang. He answered, spoke another quick burst of Italian, and hung up. "Nico, get the surveillance feeds online. I want eyes on every approach." Nico nodded and moved to a wall of monitors, his fingers flying across a keyboard. Dante turned back to me. "We need to discuss the locket." "I've told you everything I remember," I said, sinking onto a low-slung sofa, the adrenaline of the evening finally starting to wane. Silver, oval, filigree pattern. Was there anything unusual about it? Anything that seemed odd? I closed my eyes, digging through memories over a decade old. It felt heavier than it looked, and the back was engraved with some kind of pattern. Not flowers or anything, more like... I frowned, struggling to visualize it. More like numbers or letters. I always assumed it was a maker's mark. Dante exchanged a look with Nico. "Did you ever open it, aside from seeing the picture?" Of course it was a locket. I paused as another detail surfaced. Wait, the picture wasn't glued in. It was set in a tiny frame that you could lift out. I took it out once to look at it more closely. "And behind the photo?" Dante's voice was sharp with intensity. I shook my head. "Nothing. Just the empty space." "Are you certain?" He moved to sit beside me, his dark eyes boring into mine. "Think carefully, Clara." His proximity made it hard to concentrate. "I don't... Wait." A faint memory sparked. There was a tiny piece of folded paper tucked behind the photo. I thought it was just padding to keep the picture from rattling. Dante straightened, his excitement palpable beneath his controlled exterior. That could be it. A count. Numbers, coordinates, a password. He turned to Nico. Expand the search. Check for safety deposit boxes in her parents' names, storage units, anything that might require a key or code. Nico nodded and stepped away to make a call. I still don't understand, I said, wrapping my arms around myself. If my father was involved in something so dangerous, why would he give me evidence that could incriminate him? To protect you, Dante said, his voice softening. If he was planning to talk to the authorities, he knew the risk he was taking. The locket was his insurance policy, proof to back up his testimony if something happened to him. And something did happen. My voice cracked. He and my mother died because he tried to do the right thing. Yes. Dante offered no false comfort. Your father made dangerous enemies, the same enemies who are now looking for that hard drive, and for you. I closed my eyes, feeling overwhelmed. All these years, I'd grieved a tragic accident. Would knowing the truth have changed anything? He asked gently. Would it have brought them back? No. I looked at him, a sudden chilling thought occurring to me. Your family, the Morettis, were they? No. He shook his head firmly. My family had no part in your father's death. The organization he worked for was a rival operation, one my father had been trying to dismantle for years. Your father? He died 6 years ago. A shadow of old pain crossed his face. He was poisoned during what was supposed to be a peace negotiation. I'm sorry, I murmured, the words feeling utterly inadequate. He gave a slight nod. I have spent the last 6 years consolidating power and trying to legitimize our family's operations. The evidence on that hard drive would help me finish what my father started. It would destroy the very organization responsible for your parents' murders. The bitter irony was not lost on me. So we both want the same thing, for different reasons. Perhaps not so different. His eyes held mine. We both want justice for our fathers, and we both know what it is to build a life from the ashes. In that moment, something shifted between us, a sense of recognition, a connection that was as unexpected as it was unnerving. This man who had stormed into my life, who embodied everything I should fear, suddenly felt less like a monster and more like an ally. Nico cleared his throat, breaking the spell. Boss, the team found something. A safety deposit box at First Chicago Bank, registered to Elizabeth Rossi. He handed Dante a tablet. Opened 1 week before the fire. My heart pounded. Elizabeth was my full name, though I'd only ever gone by Clara. My father opened a box in my name. A common tactic for hiding something valuable, Dante said, studying the tablet. We'll need to access it. I'd have to be there, I said, with my ID. Too risky. If they've connected you to Ivanov, they'll be watching the banks. Dante rubbed his jaw, thinking. We need a diversion. Before he could say more, a shrill alarm blared through the bunker. Nico rushed to the screens. Perimeter breach, north quadrant, 3 vehicles, heavily armed. Dante's transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The thoughtful man was gone, replaced by a cold, hard predator. How many? At least a dozen hostiles. Our men are engaging, but they're outgunned. Evacuation Protocol 3. Alert all teams. Dante moved to a panel on the wall, which slid open to reveal an arsenal of firearms. He selected a handgun, checked it with practiced ease, and tucked it into a shoulder holster. Nico, take Clara through the tunnel to the safe house in the city. No. The word was out of my mouth before I could stop it. Both men stared at me. No. I repeated more firmly this time. I'm tired of running. If that locket is the key to ending this, then I need to be the one to get it. Dante studied me, a flicker of something like respect in his eyes. It is too dangerous. My entire life is dangerous now thanks to you. I shot back, standing up, my anger giving me strength. You don't get to decide what risks I take, not anymore. A loud explosion from above rocked the bunker, sending a shower of dust from the ceiling. Nico's phone buzzed. They've breached the main house, boss. 8 minutes until they reach this elevator. Dante swore, then made a split-second decision. Change of plans. We all go. Nico, the Bentley, underground exit. He turned to me. Stay close. Do exactly as I say. Understood? I nodded, my fear warring with a strange new determination. Understood. Good. He handed me a small pistol. It felt impossibly heavy in my trembling hands. Last resort only. The next few minutes were a blur. We moved through another hidden door into a garage filled with luxury cars. Nico started a dark Bentley as Dante ushered me into the back seat, sliding in beside me. The garage door opened onto a dimly lit tunnel. This tunnel exits 3 miles from the estate, Dante explained as Nico accelerated. We'll have a head start, but not for long. Who are they? I asked, my knuckles white as I gripped the door handle. Volkov's men. He was Keller's superior. He's the one who gave the order to have your parents killed. Dante's phone buzzed with updates. They've reached the bunker. They know we're gone. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever. My mind raced, trying to absorb the fact that I was fleeing for my life with a mafia boss who, against all logic, seemed determined to protect me. Finally, we emerged onto a deserted country road. Nico killed the headlights, navigating by moonlight until we reached a main highway and merged into the sparse traffic. Where to now? I asked. The bank, Dante decided. They will assume we are running to hide, not advancing on our objective. It's almost midnight, I pointed out. The bank is closed. Dante's smile was devoid of humor. For me, it will be open. He was right. When we arrived at the First Chicago Bank Tower downtown, a nervous-looking man in a rumpled suit was waiting. He hurried us through darkened corridors to the vault, his eyes darting everywhere but at Dante's face. Box 1374, as you requested, Mr. Moretti. He fumbled with a set of keys. I will give you privacy. Stay within earshot, Dante commanded. Minutes later, a heavy safety deposit box sat on a private viewing table. My hands shook as I unlocked it. Inside lay a single item, a small velvet pouch. I tipped its contents out, and there it was, the silver locket, exactly as I remembered it. Coordinates, Dante murmured, examining the numbers engraved on the back. And a date. With trembling fingers, I opened the locket. The tiny photograph of my smiling parents was still inside. I carefully lifted the small frame, revealing a folded piece of paper tucked behind it. Dante watched as I unfolded it. It contained a long string of letters and numbers, followed by a short message in my father's handwriting. For Clara, if you're reading this, I failed. The evidence is where you caught your first fish. Trust no one. I'm sorry. I love you, Dad. Tears blurred my vision. Dante gently took the paper, studying the code. This looks like an offshore account number. And the message? Do you know what it means? Through my tears, I nodded. Lake Geneva. We had a small cabin there when I was a kid. That is our destination. Dante carefully refolded the paper and handed it back to me. I tucked it into my pocket and fastened the locket around my neck. Its weight was a tangible link to the father I thought I knew, and the brave stranger he had actually been. As we left the bank, Nico tensed. Boss, we have a tail. Black SUV, 2 cars back. Change of plans, Dante said immediately. Nico, head for the river docks. We'll take the boat. He turned to me. The cabin. How far is it from the water? Right on the shore, I said. We had a private dock. Good. His arm came around me as we hurried back to the Bentley. Stay down. The drive to the river was a terrifying blur of squealing tires and sharp turns. I crouched on the floor of the back seat, the locket clutched in my hand, my father's last warning echoing in my mind. Trust no one. Was he talking about Dante? Was I making a fatal mistake? But who else could I trust? The men hunting us had murdered my parents. At least Dante wanted me alive. The car screeched to a halt. "We're here," Dante said. "Stay close." The docks were dark and deserted. Dante led us to a sleek, powerful-looking yacht. "You own a yacht?" I asked, surprised. "Several," he replied, helping me aboard. "This one is the fastest." Nico took the helm, and within minutes we were speeding down the Chicago River toward Lake Michigan. "Lake Geneva is about 50 miles northwest as the crow flies," I said. "It will take us an hour or so to—" The crack of a rifle shot interrupted me. A bullet shattered a window, spraying glass across the cabin. Dante shoved me to the floor, covering my body with his own. "They're behind us!" Nico yelled. "Speedboat, closing fast." "Can we outrun them?" Dante asked, his weight both terrifying and protective. "Not in open water. Head for the narrows near the state line. I will deal with our guests." He shifted, allowing me to breathe but keeping me low. "Stay down, Clara." More gunfire erupted, bullets pinging off the yacht's hull. Dante moved to a storage locker and pulled out a high-powered rifle. "Nico, kill the lights on my mark," he commanded. 3, 2, 1. Mark. The yacht was plunged into darkness. I could see the speedboat's spotlight sweeping the water. Dante took aim, his breathing steady. The rifle's report was deafening. I saw the spotlight on the other boat shatter. He fired twice more and the speedboat's engine sputtered and died. "They're disabled," he announced, "but they will have called for backup. We need to get to that cabin." Nico navigated us through a winding channel before the vast expanse of Lake Geneva opened up before us. Even in the dark, the familiar shoreline brought a wave of memories. "There," I pointed to a small private dock. "That's it." Dante helped me onto the weathered planks. The cabin stood dark and silent. "Wait here," he instructed, drawing his gun. He moved cautiously toward the cabin before signaling that it was clear. The door creaked open, the musty smell of disuse filling the air. "Where did you catch your first fish?" Dante asked, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. "Off the end of the dock," I said, but he wouldn't have hidden it there. Then I remembered. The boathouse. We kept the fishing gear there. I was practicing casting and I hooked a mounted base on the wall. My father thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. Dante nodded to Nico, who took up a post by the front door. We went to the small boathouse attached to the dock. Dante broke the rusted padlock and we stepped inside. On the far wall, just as I remembered, hung the mounted fish. "There," I said, pointing. "Behind that." Dante lifted the heavy mount from the wall, revealing a small metal safe embedded in the plaster. A combination lock secured it. The numbers on the locket, I realized, pulling it from my neck. With trembling fingers, I dialed the sequence. The safe clicked open. Inside was a waterproof case. I lifted it out and opened it. There lay a sleek black hard drive and a sealed envelope with my name on it. "The missing drive," Dante said quietly. "Ivanov must have found it, then hidden it here again." Before I could open the letter, Nico's urgent voice came from outside. "Boss! Vehicles approaching!"